usually there will be only 3, 4, 5 presenters in a group. It takes about an hour and a half. Each one of the presenters today will only have Steve. Steve Flassberg is one of our star consultants, veteran consultant, and he will play a TA. So usually he's much better than this. Mm-hmm. Usually, so he's I don't even know what he's going to present. So
me neither.
You don't either? Good.
That's what sometimes happens.
Usually a presenter does prepare 3 to 4 to 5 minutes, and Steve has. Each one of them goes sequentially. So they will have only one presentation, and we tape each one of them on a camera. And then we replay it for everyone. And the first thing that happens after each clip is that the presenter himself or herself will say something about the presentation, things that they want to maintain, things that are working great, but also things that they may want to change. And when we view the video clips, we use that form that you have in your packages. So we would repeat these for every presenter, 3, 4, 5. And at the end of each round, presenter says something, each one of the other participants says something about what the presenter did, and also the consultant then wraps it up and tries to get the presenter, each one of the TAs, to perhaps focus on 1 or 2 things that they may want to work on from then on. Any questions before we get into the role play? Cool. Yes, Kathy.
Do you issue a formal write-up after that, or is this just for your...
Good question. It's just oral. There's no formal write-up after this. Mm-hmm. So, whenever you're ready, Steve.
Okay. How many of you guys like music? Raise your hand if you like music. Okay. Now, keep your hand up. Do you like contemporary music at all? Rock music, indie rock music? Most of you still like that? What's one of your favorite bands? Queen. Great example. Thank you. Does anyone else like bands like Radiohead, or going a little older like Nirvana or Smashing Pumpkins? All these kind of modern alternative rock, indie rock, or classic rock bands. Okay. So these bands are often led by guitarists. That's like the main instrument in a lot of these bands. And what I wanted to talk about today is how guitarists achieve some of the really varied and interesting sounds that they get. Okay? And so basically what guitarists use, and other instrumentalists also use them, bass players and keyboards, but these are really primarily for guitarists, are what we call stomp boxes or effect pedals. So if you've ever been to a rock concert, you'll notice that there's usually a bunch of things lying on the ground. They look like this typically, in front of the guitar player, and they stomp on them, and whenever they do, they get different sounds. So what I wanted to do today was talk about what are the different kinds of stomp boxes or effect pedals that exist, what kinds of sounds do they make, so that the next time you go to a concert, you can kind of be more aware of what the musicians are doing to get the cool sounds that they're getting. Okay? So typically, there are 3 main classes of effect pedals. There are what we call gain pedals, or these are kind of your distortion pedals. So that's one class. Then there are also sort of modulation or filter pedals. And then there are time-based effects, time-based pedals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one of these and what they are. So if you imagine, basically, guitarist is playing guitar. It's got an instrument cable in it. It comes in, it plugs into some of these effect pedals, and then that goes into the amp. And usually amps can produce a pretty simple sound. And what these pedals do is they modulate that sound. They change that sound in some way. Okay? So gain pedals, what they do is they add distorting effects. They make it sound more rock, distortion-like. And there's kind of 3 basic categories of those. So there's overdrive pedals. That's sort of a light distortion. Then there's what we might call distortion pedals. Those are heavier sounds. You can think metal bands and things like that. And then you have this kind of weird category that's called a fuzz pedal. And this was actually the first kind of distortion effect ever invented, the first kind of guitar pedal ever invented. And what was happening was in the 60s, these rock bands were kind of coming into their heyday, and they wanted to make more aggressive sounds. And what they found is if they cut or ripped their speakers and their amps, it produced this weird, fuzzy, like really distorted sounding thing. And so this British guitar tech invented this basically transistor-based effect that reproduced that kind of sound, and that was the first effect pedal. So bands like Smashing Pumpkins use this, or Nirvana, lots of contemporary rock bands, Radiohead I mentioned, they use that. And so basically this is sort of increasing amounts of distorted sound. That's what these pedals provide. Modulation and filter effects, these are things that change basically the sound wave that you're hearing and make it sound kind of weirder or more psychedelic, things like that. So the most common effect you've probably heard of for a filter pedal would be a wah-wah pedal. That's sort of the like 70s funk, like wah, 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 that's that kind of thing. And usually those are built into a pedal that you can actually rock back and forth. And what you're doing when you're rocking back and forth is filtering different frequencies. And that's why it's like wah. Okay, so that's that. Other kinds of modulation effects include phasers, and what those do is modulate the phase of the signal. So that's like wow, 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 kind of similar to this filter effect. You can also have chorus effects. Those are very popular. And what those do is they split your guitar signal in two, and one of those signals has its pitch modulated. And if you think of the Nirvana song "Come As You Are," that intro riff, do 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 do, the sound that makes is a chorus pedal. You could also have tremolo pedals. Tremolo modulates the volume, so it goes on and off, so it's kind of a stuttering or helicoptering effect. And there's other classes of modulation pedals as well. I'm not going to go into the details. My favorite kind of effect is this kind, which is a time-based effect. So first you have delay pedals, and that's what this one is right here. And so what this is it basically reproduces the notes you're playing at some sort of delayed time. So if you're like do-do-do, it'll go do-do-do, 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 do-do-do. And you can change the way that the delayed signal sounds. Is it faster? Is it slower? You can usually sync it up with the tempo of your song. This is a very popular big effect. The other main kind of time-based effect would be reverb or reverberation. And so what that does is it simulates the sound of, for example, you playing in a big church hall. Okay, and that's it for today.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Steve. So usually what would happen here, whoops, is that then the next presenter would come and he or she would be taped and so forth until we're done with all the presenters. And then the consultant, in this case me, would unplug the camera from here and plug it to the projector that you may have in the room. In this particular case, we'll have to use that TV because there are no speakers in the room. The projector wouldn't work. So that's one of the things that you have to check too, whether the room where we're going to be doing the micro-teaching has all the equipment necessary to make this work. And as we watch the clip, the same presentation again, try to write down what do you think are some aspects to maintain, things that Steve is doing great, and some suggestions you may have for improvement. And when we go around the room and making all these comments, what usually we tell the participants is to start with some of the one or two good things that they've observed, and then perhaps one suggestion for improvement. So you may notice several things on both sides, but then try to focus on one of them. Okay. Let's see if the volume.
Okay. How many of you guys like? That's it for today.
Great. Thank you for the great presentation, Steve. So what things did you observe that you worked great? What would you like to change?
Well, I thought it had a lot of enthusiasm. So I thought that was good. I was a little too loud, maybe. That might have just been the recording level. But yeah, I think a couple things I noticed that I'd like to change. One, when I was writing on the board, I didn't do a good job of kind of facing the audience. I just had my back to the audience. And I didn't think I used the board in the best way. It's a little disorganized. Probably could have spread it out more and maybe planned a little bit ahead more about how I was going to, exactly how I was going to use the board. I was sort of making that up more on the fly, and I think that could have used more preparation.
Cool. Does anyone want to add something in terms of what Steve did great and what he could improve on? Yes, Jess?
Have you noticed how much easier it is for somebody who's left-handed to write on the board?
Yeah,
because it doesn't, you don't block. And that was really interesting to see.
Oh, that's a good point.
I do get marker on my hands, though.
Sort of set the stage of like, this is what I want to talk about today, and then we started with, you know, there are 3 classes, and so it kind of already gets students in the mindset, okay, this is what the structure is going to be. I think whenever you were writing on the board, I think, especially for me, I feel the need to fill the time with words all the time, and so as you were writing, you were just saying stuff, and I think silence is okay. It kind of gives students too the time to breathe and absorb what you were saying. So I think just pausing and not filling, you know, every amount of time and space with words would be extremely of benefit.
What I wasn't sure about is who was the audience of this, what class was this? No, I mean, because, so, I don't know if they had, like, electrical engineering background, like you use some jargon as like signal and frequency and phase. I don't know if it would be which level, like undergrad music student or more, you know. So in either case, I think, I mean, in some ways jargon is fine, other ways it would need more explanation. So you did the best when you explained the delay, because that was very clear.
So I really liked the voicing of the effects. I thought that was great. But maybe bring in some clips of each example. That way, you can I can actually see what it sounds like.
And we have one more.
I like how you engaged us early on by asking questions, and I wish I could have seen more of that throughout the rest of the talk.
That's very.
You did great. What if you could extend it more? It's a really nice lead-in to kind of an improvement that kind of nicely couches it. Not argumentative, not accusatory, but like, hey, you did this great, let's do more.
And Steve, of everything you've seen and also kind of the feedback you've heard from the other participants, is there anything that resonates with you in terms of doing more or doing less?
Yeah, I like the comment of that I don't have to fill the space. Sometimes I think I'm afraid of silence, so I think that's a good comment to do that. And I like the suggestions of more kind of actual examples, sound samples, for example, and also more kind of questions and engaging with the audience a little more. So I like all those suggestions.
Do you think you have a kind of good strategies in place that could help you implement that in class?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Now, I'm unlikely to lecture about guitar pedals in my psychology classes, but if I did...
I was about to enroll in your class just because of it. So kind of stepping back a little bit, of course, this would be done in a smaller setting, so the camera would be closer, and there would be only 3 or 4 other participants, and everyone in that group would say something. I wouldn't just sample, but go one by one. But what questions do you have on how it works or potential problems that you may face?
Are the TAs or teachers that are put together generally of approximately the same skill level, or how do they end up getting grouped into micro-teaching sessions?
That's a great question. At this point in CTL, all the micro-teaching sessions that we do are at the request of a department. So what that means is that usually it's a cohort of new TAs from, say, CWE or communication or sociology, whatever that may be. Actually, communication is doing it this quarter. In the past, we used to have kind of open micro-teaching sessions that anyone in the university could sign up for them, and those were great because we had very diverse presentations and diverse feedback. But we phased them out for a couple of reasons. One was that we didn't have many takers. It was offered at the beginning of the quarter in TA orientation. But the second one was that there were staffing constraints. So perhaps in the future we reconsider and open this up with enough equipment and consultants and having a good outreach to all TAs, so that if you're in a department who runs it, great. But if you're not, then you also have the opportunity of doing micro-teaching organized centrally by CTL.
Can I make one quick comment?
Sure.
I think in response to your question, I think you raised a really good point, which was that it wasn't clear who my audience was, and I was just doing it kind of randomly. But that is a real issue that sometimes comes up. Even if you're having 4 or 5, let's say, chemists come in to give their little lectures. Sometimes one of them might be in a more advanced class or maybe even a graduate class. It's hard to know. So that's something you can ask the participants if you're holding one of these sessions, like, oh, is this coming from an actual lecture? Or you can kind of talk to them about it beforehand, because that's going to impact your feedback. So for example, if I was giving this to an electrical engineering crowd, then you'd want to say, well, maybe you could actually make it more sophisticated and bring that in. But if I'm doing it to less intro music class or something, then maybe keep out the technical terms. So that's going to maybe impact your feedback. And I experienced that last year. I did one with a group from sociology, which was great, but then it was unclear at some points who the audience was. So it was, sometimes the jargon is this stuff they've already know. If not, you need to make sure to define your terms, for example.
One thing I wanted to add about that, in chemistry, when we did them, it's all first-year chem grad students, and the person practicing is doing undergraduate chemistry, and then when they're trying to engage the audience, it was always a little awkward because they would ask a question that everyone there knew, but they didn't know if they were supposed to pretend to play dumb or something to try to interact with them. So I tried to start the micro-teaching sections telling all the other people watching to pretend they're an undergrad and don't be afraid to make a mistake to get the TA to deal with that. So I played really dumb sometimes and would just be I don't know, put water in it. Yeah. And that would be totally the wrong answer. Just to see how the TA would do that.
And we're running out of time in this section, but we're happy to, I guess, one-on-one if you want to run in your department and you want more guidance. There are several logistical little things that can ruin micro-teaching. And Steve and I could say many things about what could happen wrong in a micro-teaching session if the room is not prepared, if the camera is not working right, and so forth. And also in terms of you as a participant, you had just been trained on how to give feedback on video recordings. Perhaps the participants you have in the audience need a little bit more prep than what I just did, so that they have good instructions on how to say things nicely or not. And with that, yeah, Jen.
One last thing I want to note is notice how Steve got to go first. And that means that the TA usually gets to bring up the most awkward thing that you might not want to say, so you don't have to worry about, if he was blocking the board, he notices that right away, or there's some personal thing that he does. So it's always nice to give the TA the opportunity to say the thing they're most concerned about from the get-go.